I'm Stephen Monteith, and I'm here to rewrite Star Trek the original series. Why? Because it's fun. I uh, I already made a video about redoing the Star Trek franchise in the 1990s to accommodate a hypothetical new series called Starfleet Command that would help tie all the other series from that era of Star Trek together. But this isn't about creating anything new, not drastically anyway. This is about taking certain episodes of the original series and having them reshot to incorporate the new sets, the new effects, the new actors, and some new plot points from the latest era of Star Trek. These new plot points, by the way, are points that I personally would like to become canon, and points that the franchise itself has created in the 6 decades since the original series aired. Now, when Star Trek first aired in the late 1960s, continuity was not a great issue in television. The concept of reruns was still relatively unknown, and home video sales and recordings were years away. So, when the showrunners of Star Trek, including Gene Roddenberry, came up with an idea for an episode that contradicted an earlier episode, like what century Star Trek took place in, for example, they changed it without a second thought. This led to a lot of inconsistencies in the series. And of course, when later series in the franchise aired, they established new canon of their own, some of which couldn't help but contradict things that were established in the original series. I did a podcast about this a while back. I'll link it in the description. This video is a hypothetical redux of the original series, not something that I ever expect them to do. But it is interesting to think of the possibilities, even more so than in the video I did for rewriting Star Trek in the 90s. One of the new canon elements I would like to incorporate deals with the presence of so many energy beings and reality warpers in the original series. Aliens and beings that were only present for one episode and then never mentioned again, at least not in official canon. I like to think, as many others have, that some of these beings at least have connections to the Q continuum. Even in Voyager, the Q have been shown to have taken a long-term interest in humanity, much longer than we knew from the Next Generation. My theory is they made contact with humanity without totally exposing themselves until the events of Encounter at Farpoint, where they challenged Captain Jean-Luc Picard directly. Another piece of canon I'd like to address is the matter of Star Trek the Animated Series. For 2 short seasons in the 1970s, it gave us some more adventures of the crew of the Enterprise, featuring the voices of the actors from the original series. The events and even the aliens in this series are much more light-hearted, more comedic even than the original series, and a lot of people, including Gene Roddenberry himself, don't think of it as canon. Most of the references made to it in the time since have been on Star Trek Lower Decks, another comedic animated series. This is a chance to show some of those episodes in live action, including bridge officers Eric's and Mures. One more bit of canon I'd like to clear up is the order of the episodes. Star Trek as a franchise uses star dates as a system for measuring time, while later series and movies kept a closer eye on the progression of star dates. The original series and the animated series weren't always so careful, and this is a chance to clean up a bit. The episodes I've chosen are listed in production order, with one exception I'll mention as we go through them. I've chosen 26 episodes total, most from the original series and some from the animated series. Mostly they were chosen for the opportunity to adjust both old and new canon, as I said, but some of these I picked just for the fun of it. You can't have Star Trek without having a bit of fun. As I said before, we have new actors to feature in these episodes. In addition to guest stars I'll list below, obviously the new original cast includes Paul Wesley as Captain James T. Kirk, Ethan Peck as Mr. Spock, Celia Rose Gooding as Lieutenant Uhura, Jess Bush as Nurse Christine Chapel, and Andre Day Kim as Transporter Chief Kyle. Each of these actors have already been featured significantly on Star Trek Strange New Worlds, and Ethan Peck has even been on Star Trek Discovery. Additional actors from Strange New Worlds who will make guest appearances are Anson Mount as Christopher Pike, Rebecca Romaine as Number 1, Una Chin Riley, Babs Olusanmoken, I'm certain I got that name wrong, as Dr. Mbenga, and Dan Janote as George Samuel Kirk. Okay, that's enough of an introduction, I think. We'll get into more details as we go along. And of course, there will be spoilers for just about every episode and movie that I mention. The first episode I'd like to redo is Where No Man Has Gone Before, the second pilot of the original series, and the first to feature Captain Kirk. There was a previous pilot for the series, The Cage, but I'll get to that later on. There are some minor inconsistencies between this pilot and the rest of the original series, such as the uniforms, the Enterprise running on lithium instead of dilithium, and even James Kirk's middle initial being R instead of T, which we learned in Star Trek VI stands for Tiberius. A bigger piece of canon we could stand to have cleared up is the circumstances under which Kirk assumed command from Captain Pike. It was established in the Menagerie that Kirk took command of the Enterprise when Pike was promoted to fleet captain, and that Pike's disfiguring accident took place later. But the Season 1 finale of Strange New Worlds makes it seem like Kirk took command because of the accident. I'd like this episode to firmly establish which it was, with Pike and his officers on screen to pass the torch to Kirk and his crew, whichever the reason for his promotion. And I'd especially like to see Sam Kirk there, because as was established in the original series episode What Are Little Girls Made Of, Sam and his family were there to see James Kirk off on his 5-year mission. It would be a nice opening scene. The plot of Where No Man Has Gone Before involves the Enterprise encountering the galactic barrier, with Lieutenant Gary Mitchell, Kirk's friend from the Academy, gaining powers from the encounter. Godlike powers. Some would say, and have said, that they're even the powers of the Q. This is the first opportunity for the Q to test humanity by granting their powers to a human to see if he would be corrupted by them. It wouldn't be the first time they've tested somebody like this in the series. While Gary Mitchell failed their test, Dr. Elizabeth Daynard didn't, which may just intrigue the Q enough to want to keep an eye on the Enterprise. Maybe we can even confirm which of the blonde women Kirk was in love with during his Academy days that Gary Mitchell sent his way. Could have been Ruth, Janet Wallace, Carol Marcus, Janet Lester. There were a lot of blondes. I do have my own pick for this, but I'll explain who and why later on in this video. The next episodes I'd like to redo are The Naked Time and Tomorrow is Yesterday. The episodes as they originally aired were months apart, but during early production, they were intended to be a two-parter. The Naked Time ended with the Enterprise going backwards in time, and Tomorrow is Yesterday began with them unexpectedly ending up in Earth's past. Just because the two episodes don't have anything else in common doesn't mean we can't tie them together given the opportunity. The Naked Time is one of the more famous episodes from the original series. It's the one where everyone goes loopy and starts acting drunk, while the Enterprise slowly falls towards a planet after their engines are shut down. In addition to comedic scenes like Sulu chasing people around the ship with a sword, there are a lot of really good character moments in the episode, especially with Kirk and Spock. Nurse Chapel had some interesting moments with Spock that obviously need to be adjusted in light of their relationship in Strange New Worlds. We'll get more into Spock and Christine's relationship as we go along with this video. Tomorrow is Yesterday, as I said, would pick up where The Naked Time leaves off, as originally intended. It's also an opportunity to combine this episode with Assignment Earth, another episode where the Enterprise ends up in the 1960s, featuring Gary Seven, a human raised by aliens to help keep an eye on humanity's progress. It was meant to be a backdoor pilot, as they say, for a series with Gary Seven as the main character, and it still could be. Just this last spring, the second season of Star Trek Picard tied this episode together with a recurring storyline from Star Trek The Next Generation. A cameo by Will Wheaton as Wesley Crusher in Star Trek Picard established that the travelers of The Next Generation watch over the supervisors and their agents mentioned in Assignment Earth. Tying Tomorrow is Yesterday and Assignment Earth together could give Star Trek the opportunity, at long last, to launch a Gary Seven series, one with Will Wheaton in a recurring role. The next episode is called Charlie X. It's about a young man, Charlie Evans, who comes aboard the Enterprise as a survivor from a ship that crashed on the planet Thasia. The Thasians, a one-shot species that, even in universe, were considered mythical, could be another front for the Q, with Charlie being one of their tests, one of their experiments. John Delancey could be the voice of the Thasian who comes for Charlie at the end of the episode, just like he came for Amanda in the Next Generation episode True Q. Beyond that, the episode has some great character moments between Uhura and Spock, including her singing a song about him while he plays the Vulcan harp. A deleted scene from another episode had Uhura asking Spock to teach her how to play it. That scene could be used here. Next, there's Balance of Terror. Yes, I know, it's a classic episode, and you don't mess with the classics. On top of which, Strange New Worlds already did their own redux of this with the episode Equality of Mercy. But there's more. Trek canon about the Earth-Romulan War has changed, as has the use of cloaking devices. That can all be retconned, as well as adding in the new actors from Equality of Mercy, including Ali Hassan succeeding Gary Wahlberg as Commander Hansen, and Matthew Macfadyen succeeding Mark Leonard as the Romulan commander. Though I wish Equality of Mercy had used James Frain, the actor who played Sarek in Star Trek Discovery, as a nod to Mark Leonard being the original actor. Anyway. Also, along with Mega Santu succeeding Barbara Baldavin as Angela Martine in Equality of Mercy, she can also return for Ms. Baldavin's other appearances in the original series. The episodes Shore Leave, Space Seed, and Turnabout Intruder, all of which I'm including in this video. It's an opportunity to add more women to the original series cast than just Uhura and Chapel. Speaking of Christine Chapel, What Are Little Girls Made Of is next on the list. First, we can clear up the bit about only Kirk calling his brother Sam, since everyone on Strange New Worlds calls him that too. And we can cut the bit where Chapel asks Spock if he's ever been engaged, since Strange New Worlds establishes that she clearly knows the answer to that question. We can give Chapel a lot more stuff to do in the episode, which will undoubtedly tie into whatever Strange New Worlds has in store for her and her fiancé Roger Corby. Specifically, I think the episode should end on a scene of Chapel instead of the original series tradition of most episodes ending on Kirk. This Redux is a chance to give all the supporting characters on the original series more of a spotlight, like Strange New Worlds has been doing with its supporting characters. Now we get into the Menagerie, parts 1 and 2. Like I said, we need to clear up a few circumstances around Pike's accident. For example, how was Spock able to find out about it, but no one else on the Enterprise? Not even Uhura or Chapel, who both served under Pike. Whoever told Spock would have told them too. And they should definitely be more included in these episodes because of it. For that matter, it's a chance to let the whole Strange New Worlds cast take on a classic episode or two. We even have Melissa George from Star Trek Discovery to succeed Susan Oliver as Vina. And it's an opportunity to bring in Jeffrey Combs as Boyce, the doctor from the episode The Cage. That would make him part of every Star Trek era. We can also clear up a few minor details about Pike's history, including his service record and his attitude about women. His original characterization was kind of misogynistic. It was also much more belligerent, though most of the episode he was just trying to keep the Telosians from reading his thoughts. Speaking of the Telosians, they definitely seemed more helpful and less kidnappy during their appearance in Star Trek Discovery. This is an opportunity to get their characterization firmly established. Next is the episode Shore Leave, where the crew comes upon the so-called amusement park planet. I would like to have someone comment in this episode on how weird it is that a planet with so many plants doesn't have any animals, even insects. I mean, I don't know that much about ecology and ecosystems and whatnot, but a planet that is this much like Earth that has absolutely no animal life, that should have been a warning sign to someone. I'd also like to propose an in-universe explanation for how easily everyone seems to get caught up in their fantasies. For example, it's one thing for Kirk to still want to beat the tar out of Finnegan after all these years, but he just leaps right into the fight. It's this kind of thing that gives Kirk a reputation for fighting first and asking questions later. But I'd like to propose that it's all the planet's doing. Not only does it construct your fantasies, but it influences you into becoming part of them. Like a carnival barker getting people to go on the rides at amusement parks. Now, this isn't just an opportunity to take advantage of better special effects to make the amusement park planet more interesting. It's also a chance to explore these characters in greater depth. This is a planet that taps into your mind and creates what you're thinking. We could see some real fantasies come to life and learn what they have to say about the people fantasizing them. Take Kirk, for example. You wouldn't think after all these years, after becoming captain of the Enterprise, that he'd still be bothered by a bully from his academy days. And yet, here we are. It really humanizes him when you think about it. Deep inside, the epitome of the intrepid space explorer is a man who is still bothered by thoughts of being bullied in his youth. It's a chance to explore that. It's also a chance, as I said earlier, to explore the character of Angela Martine Teller, who lost her fiancé on the day of their wedding in Balance of Terror. She's the only person in the episode Shore Leave whose fantasies we never got to see. Even Spock unwittingly summoned a tiger at one point. Instead of having Kirk take up half the episode with both Finnegan and Ruth, I'd keep Kirk to just experiencing Finnegan and use the save time to explore Angela's grief by having a recreation of her fiancé appear. Someone she can say goodbye to, which she never got a chance to do originally. It's a whole other aspect of fantasies coming to life that this episode could explore. As for the unanswered question of who created the amusement park planet, well, the answer to that can tie into the next episode on my list, the Squire of Gothos. The most popular fan theory about Trelane, a reality warper who captures the Enterprise and nearly kills Captain Kirk, is that he's a member of the Q Continuum. I'm a pretty big fan of that theory myself. It was helped along by one of the best Star Trek novels, Q Squared by Peter David, who has written quite a few Trek novels. But there's a piece missing from that theory. Trelane's dependence on his machines, which seem to be the real source of power on this planet. Just like the amusement park planet, Trelane's machines can build or do anything immediately, though they do seem to have some limitations. Or maybe it's just Trelane's mastery of them that is lacking. I think the caretaker from the episode Shore Leave should appear at the end as one of Trelane's parents and explain that Trelane is going through their version of an apprenticeship, creating new planets, but that he's imperfect in his use of them and still needs to be taught how to get along with other races, other beings. The Caretaker's race has their own version of the Prime Directive that includes not harming inferior races or using them for their own amusement. They're not the Q, but with their advanced technology, they're basically indistinguishable from them. What's my theory about who this race is? Well, there's one more episode dealing with the amusement park planet, and I'll cover it more when we get there. For now, let's talk about Arena, the episode famous for having Kirk fight a Gorn captain. I should probably say the episode infamous for having Kirk fight the Gorn captain. Their fight is the stuff of memes and parodies. William Shatner actually recreated it several years ago in a commercial for Star Trek the video game. One of the most infamous parts of the episode is the Gorn suit itself. It's been mocked to the Delta Quadrant and back. Later portrayals of the Gorn have been strictly animated, either cartoon or CGI, but I believe a live-action Gorn is still possible. The 2016 Suicide Squad movie won the Oscar for makeup effects because of how they brought King Croc to life. Side note, they beat Star Trek Beyond for that Oscar, so having the same kind of makeup effects show up in a remake of Arena would certainly be poetic. Another opportunity for this episode is to bring up the fact that Spock, Uhura, and Chapel all had close encounters with the Gorn in the Strange New Worlds episode All Those Who Wander, along with Kirk's brother Sam. That could certainly make this episode more interesting. And then there are the Metrons. the powerful alien race who abduct Kirk and the Gorn captain in the first place and make them fight. Literally nothing else is known about the Metrons canonically. So this would be a chance to confirm that Metrons are another front for the Q, putting the captain and crew of the Enterprise through another of their tests. And I do think the crew should be involved here as well, doing more than simply watching Kirk fight. Space Seed is another classic Trek episode I want to update. Look, I'll be honest with you, most of these are classic episodes. That's not why I picked them. I picked most of them for the opportunity to firmly establish canon, like I said, and Space Seed is no different. When it originally aired, it established the eugenics wars as taking place in the 1990s, and they were still having trouble establishing how far in the future Star Trek actually was. Both in this episode and in Star Trek II Wrath of Khan, they talk about how Khan was on Earth 200 years ago. And according to the established Trek timeline, he's off by about 70 to 100 years. This can be fixed not just by changing dialogue, but by changing when exactly the eugenics wars took place. The Star Trek Picard episode Farewell makes it seem like the Trek franchise is set to do just that, since it shows Dr. Adam Soong with a file in his hands labeled Project Khan, and that episode is set in the 2020s, which would set the eugenics wars right before World War III, and set Khan's escape from Earth right at about 200 years ago. Oh, and it would give us a chance to introduce Chekhov in an epic fashion, since in Wrath of Khan they both recognize each other, but in Space Seed, Chekhov was never seen. Walter Koenig hadn't been cast yet. This is a small continuity error that has long since been acknowledged by the fandom. Walter Koenig himself even theorized, sort of jokingly, that Chekhov once kept Khan waiting to use the bathroom one time, and that Khan vowed never to forget his face. Basically, we can have their first meeting be anything we want now. Not to mention, now that Spock and Uhura and Chapel have served alongside La, Nooney, and Singh, one of Khan's descendants, there's an episode to include her in this episode somehow. An opportunity to include her in this episode. The actress who played her being Christina Chong, of course. As for who should play Khan, I want to get an actual Sikh. Ricardo Montalban and Benedict Cumberbatch were both great actors, but there are also plenty of great Sikh actors. Pick any of them you like. Maybe they'll even star alongside Brent Spiner as Adam Soong in a Khan miniseries. The next episode is Operation Annihilate. This isn't a terribly important episode in the grand scheme of things, but it does have one major distinction. It's the episode where Sam Kirk dies. In the original episode, we don't even see his death, and for good reason, because Sam is played by William Shatner, with a fake mustache and some bad aging makeup. I'm sure it was more than good enough for televisions in the 1960s, but now we have an actual actor who can play Sam one more time. One last time, I should say. He can have a proper send-off, not just from his brother, but also from his former crewmates, Spock, Uhura, and Chapel. Oh, and speaking of good enough for television in the 1960s, the pancake creatures we see they're actually more terrifying than you might think. Sure, they look silly, but imagine one or dozens of those things flying at you, and once they attach themselves, you're in debilitating pain until you do what they want you to do. We can make a decent horror episode out of this, I'm telling you. Next is the episode Metamorphosis, which introduced us originally to Zephram Cochrane, the man who invented warp drive in the Star Trek universe. In 1967, he was played by Glenn Corbett, but in the movie Star Trek First Contact, he's played by the phenomenal actor James Cromwell. Cromwell revived the role in Star Trek Enterprise and in a voice cameo on the Lower Decks episode Grounded. This would be a chance to bring him back one more time in live action, along with a new actor to play him in a rejuvenated state. Perhaps he could even allude to having met the crews of other starships before, without violating the Temporal Prime Directive, of course. The episode Amok Time is another one that Strange New Worlds paid homage to in the episode Spock Amok, where Spock has a dream that his human and Vulcan halves are separate and fighting each other. There are several elements of the classic episode that no longer fit canon, again, mostly revolving around Spock's relationship with Christine Chapel, but also with Uhura not knowing who T'Pring is, despite her playing a significant role in Strange New Worlds. The actress Gia Santu can continue in the role she assumed from Arlene Martell in the original series. Also, there's Kara Zediker, who played T'Pau in Enterprise, succeeding Celia Lovsky. There's also the opportunity to explain why neither of Spock's parents are present for what is supposed to be his wedding ceremony, and to confirm the fan theory that T'Pring is pregnant by Ston. A lot of episodes from the original series have never even been referenced again in Star Trek canon. And then there are episodes like Mirror Mirror that introduce elements to Star Trek canon that the franchise can't help but revisit. Redoing this episode would give them a chance to adjust some canon that's been established in the decades since, such as sexuality being fungible, the history established by Discovery and Enterprise, not to mention that Mirror Spock's father is part of the Resistance, and a potential tie-in with the forthcoming Section 31 series. I'd also like it if the episode could confirm a personal bit of headcanon, that Edith Keeler is the reason this universe and the Prime universe are connected. I don't want to redo the episode City on the Edge of Forever, but I would like it if the events of that episode are the source of the Mirror universe. To recap, McCoy saved Edith Keeler's life, she delayed the United States entry into World War II, and the Axis powers took over the Earth. This, I feel, would be a good reason for the Mirror universe to have such a close connection to the Prime universe, because McCoy created it. This is also an opportunity to show a little more of evil Scotty, evil McCoy, and evil Uhura. Now for a more lighthearted episode, The Trouble with Tribbles. There's not much reason to redo this one, apart from needing to adjust canon about money in the future when Uhura wants to buy a Tribble. Also, Discovery made it clear that some Klingons have returned to ridged foreheads already, though the original series shows that there are still some with smooth foreheads who will later transition, like Captain Koloth. We can also show how Koloth and Kirk know each other, since the episode made it seem like they'd run into each other before. And one more thing just for fun. Get all the Deep Space Nine actors from Trials and Tribulations and have them skulk around in the background while the main action is happening. That would be awesome. Now we come to the episode Journey to Babel. Another Star Trek episode that established just how terrible Spock is about sharing personal information with other people, even his friends. James Frain and Mia Kirshner can resume their roles as Ambassador Sarek and Amanda Grayson from Discovery, succeeding Mark Leonard and Jane Wyatt from the original series. In fact, in this episode, we could have a scene of Sarek and Amanda discussing how, since Sybok is all but lost to them, and Michael Burnham is lost to them, Spock is all they have left. A Private Little War is another episode that doesn't have much impact on the rest of the franchise. It is notable, though, for being one of only 2 episodes to feature Dr. Mbenga, played by Booker Bradshaw in the 60s and by Babs Olusanmokun in Strange New Worlds. He could be returning to the Enterprise to visit Spock, Uhura, and Chapel. It's a pretty big coincidence, considering Spock's injury in this episode and Mbenga's expertise with Vulcan physiology, but it's unavoidable since McCoy has replaced him as Chief Medical Officer. Now, there are many more original series episodes I'd like to redo, some classics, some merely infamous. But the last of the live action episodes on my list before we get into the animated series is Turnabout Intruder, the series finale where Janice Lester switches bodies with James T. Kirk so she can finally be a starship captain. This episode established that Starfleet doesn't allow women to be captains, something that has been thoroughly retconned in the decades since. So now we have a chance to retcon this episode. This is also a chance to do this episode right. See, a fair amount of essays have been made on how Janice Lester sounds abusive towards Kirk, with the caveat that it's still sexist writing. Kirk mentions that if they had stayed together, they would have killed each other. It talks about the joy she takes in being stronger than him, mocking him for being scared all the time, and how she makes a joke of how a small woman like her could ever overpower a man. It could even tie into what I said about how in Shore Leave, Kirk was still plagued by having been bullied by Finnegan, even though the Academy was far behind him. And if Janice Lester was the blonde lab technician that Gary Mitchell taught how to seduce Kirk, then this would tie right back into where No Man Has Gone Before, with her being abusive towards Kirk having created a wedge between him and Gary. There's a real opportunity here to explore how abuse can happen to anyone, how it can be perpetrated by anyone. Okay, getting back to more lightheartedness. The first of the animated series episodes I'd like to adapt for live action is More Tribbles, More Troubles, the animated sequel to The Trouble with Tribbles. The Klingon Captain Koloth returns, chasing Cyrano Jones' ship because he's the one who started the Tribble menace in the first place. Of course, the Enterprise protects Cyrano Jones, which causes conflict. In fact, there's an actual battle between the Enterprise and a Klingon ship, something we did not see very much of in the original series. Also, this is a chance for Koloth to declare Tribbles mortal enemies of the Klingon Empire and announce the start of the Great Tribble Hunt. Moving on. The Infinite Vulcan is an episode of the animated series written by Walter Koenig, who was not included in the animated series as Chekhov. In addition to being primarily remembered as the episode with a giant Spock, this episode features a scientist from Earth's past who was involved in creating the augments, i.e. Khan and his people. This is an opportunity to put a member of the Soong family in Kirk's era, played by Brent Spiner, of course. Now, Yesteryear is the one episode of the animated series that Gene Roddenberry considered to be canon. The Enterprise returns to the Guardians of Forever, and due to a time travel mishap, Spock dies as a little boy rather than living and eventually joining Starfleet. He's replaced on the Enterprise by Thelen the Andorian. By the way, when redoing this episode, it should establish what happened to Thelen after the timeline was fixed. Was he on a different ship after this point? Anyway, it's another opportunity to bring back James Frain and Mia Kirshner as Spock's parents, as well as a young Michael Burnham and even a young Sybok. Paul Guilfoyle, who played the Guardian of Forever in Discovery, can return to the role here, succeeding Bart LaRue from the original series. There's also an opportunity regarding the characters Alik Om and Majan Gray, Federation historians present for the Enterprise's mission. The episode can confirm that they created the Department of Temporal Investigations, with Kirk's various time travel shenanigans as the inaugural report. Now, the character of Harcourt Fenton Mudd appeared twice in the original series, and I thought about adapting one or both of those episodes. But instead, I'm going with the animated series episode Mudd's Passion. Rainn Wilson can return as Harry Mudd, succeeding Roger C. Carmel, and Catherine Burrell can reprise her role as Stella Mudd from Discovery. In Mudd's Passion, Mudd is peddling love potions, basically, and offers to let Christine Chapel use one on Spock to finally get their love requited. But love potions are basically date rape drugs, and I've never liked the idea that Nurse Chapel would use something like that. On the other hand, Mudd could still use it himself, as he does in the animated series episode, as a means of distracting the Enterprise crew while he tries to make an escape. It could simply be an episode in the vein of The Naked Time, and it would still give the crew a chance to let their feelings come to the surface. One of those episodes, basically. The episode Once Upon a Planet returns the crew to the amusement park planet. In addition to a chance to recreate some fantastic scenes in live action, such as Enterprise crew members having a picnic with a dragon, the episode can finally answer the question of who the caretaker is and why he's there, like I said we would do. My answer to this question ties into another Star Trek character who is known as a caretaker, the alien entity who transports Voyager to the Delta Quadrant in the 24th century. It may not be the same caretaker, but there are obvious similarities between the two. They both possess great technology, far beyond that known to humanity even in the time of Star Trek. They both are capable of creating Earth-like environments and conducting medical procedures on humans despite only just being introduced to them. And with so little being known about either caretaker, it wouldn't be too hard at all to create a narrative that ties the two together, one that could be hinted at in this episode. Not to mention the actual plot of the episode, that the caretaker has died and the planet is gaining sentience. There's so much potential to explore this. The Counterclock Incident is the final episode from Kirk's time as captain of the Enterprise on his original 5-year mission. This episode established the character of Robert April, the captain of the Enterprise from even before Pike was captain. He was voiced by James Doohan in this episode, but is played by Adrian Holmes in Strange New Worlds. There could be flashback scenes incorporated showing the early days of the Enterprise, including Robert April's wife Sarah, who was the Enterprise's first doctor. A woman doctor on the Enterprise a century before Beverly Crusher? That's something worth seeing. The episode itself has a rather silly premise, with the ship being caught in a universe where time runs backwards, reverting everyone to a younger age. But the Star Trek has seen sillier. That's it for the 26 episodes I promised, but there are 2 more installments I'd like to make to the original series era of Star Trek. One small and one very big. First, I'd like to do a short Trek episode called Starbase 25. In the Lower Decks episode An Embarrassment of Dupplers, it was established that Kirk and Spock attempted to crash the command conference after party on Starbase 25 and failed, ending up in a bar where they carved their names to be found over a century later by Mariner and Boimler. This short episode can show Kirk and Spock reflecting back on the episodes listed above, including key moments where they grew close together. And, as I said in my podcast about wokeness in Star Trek, they should kiss on screen. It doesn't have to be sexual, that can happen off screen. But Kirk and Spock should definitely kiss on screen. And the last very big change I'd make to the original series era is to remake Star Trek the Motion Picture. In my most recent podcast, I defended the motion picture as better than it gets credit for being. That doesn't mean that it can't be even better, though. And there are just a few bits of canon and headcanon that I'd like to establish firmly. First, I'd like it to be on-screen canon that Kirk and Spock are Talia, however you pronounce it. It's a Vulcan word that can mean brothers or lovers. I'd like to establish that it was indeed Kirk and not V'ger who contacted Spock telepathically, and that the simple feeling between them is love, not just friendship. I'd also like to confirm a few theories about V'ger. Plenty of people have speculated that V'ger has a connection to the Borg, but I would rather it be connected to the artificial intelligences in Picard Season 1. It would explain why V'ger has so many destructive weapons. I'd also like it to tie into the civilization that invented the Doomsday Machine, which would further antagonize Will Decker towards it, considering he's the son of Commodore Matt Decker, who died to stop the Doomsday Machine. And finally, I'd like to establish the history of the Voyager probes in light of the new Trek history we're about to learn in the Khan series, i.e. space exploration in the era of World War III. Star Trek the Motion Picture Redux would truly bring the franchise full circle. Okay, that's it. That is 26 episodes, 1 short Trek episode, and 1 feature-length movie. Redoing the original series to adjust it for new canon and my own head canon. It's never going to happen. I realize that. You don't need to bring it up, though I'm sure some people are. But it's something that I would absolutely love to see. And I'm certain with Paul Wesley having shown up at the end of season 1 of Strange New Worlds and confirmed for season 2 of Strange New Worlds that they will have plenty of opportunities for the new Kirk to have adventures with the Enterprise, including Spock. I hope they do take advantage of a chance to strengthen their relationship on screen. And as I said, I already gave my reasons for why I think their relationship should be a more romantic one, or at least a more physical one. In my podcast, I'll link that in the description. But other than that, I think that this is just an opportunity to bring Star Trek full circle as a franchise. We've had so many different series produced in so many different eras of television over the years, and they've all had so many different earmarks of those eras. Like I said, it's a chance to redo the classic episodes in the modern era to see what that kind of show would actually be like if it were made today. Would it still stand up? Would it be more than just something that people look back on with nostalgia? Would it still be seen as the great franchise opener that it is? I think it would. I think it would be a wonderful opportunity with all the actors and the sets and the special effects that we have now, and with everything that we know about Star Trek. I think it would be a great opportunity. Thank you for watching. Be sure to, like I said, check out the links in the description, not just for my podcast, but also for my original fiction, which you can purchase on any e-reader. Be sure to leave a rating and a review here and on anything else that you may listen to or watch or read of mine. And you can also follow me on social media. Live long and prosper.